Welcome to the Advantage Podcast, a monthly unscripted conversation with host David Ashcraft and top leaders impacting our world. Created by pastors for pastors to strengthen our leadership and expand our knowledge and influence.
That's great advice and great input. And so maybe I can get you again another time and we can talk about staffing issues, because one of the things I hear from staff or pastors a lot is just challenges in working with staff. And I'd probably go back to, Henry, I think when you and I were talking about setting this up, you did a talk at the summit years ago about the wise person, the foolish person, the evil person, I think were the three categories. And what I find is, as pastors,
it's from my book, Necessary Endings.
Yeah. So what I find is pastors struggle figuring out who's in what category. And then I think we struggle with confronting in any situation. And so maybe I can get you another time and we can talk about confrontation and how pastors maybe can learn to excel at that, not just to be confrontationalists, but so that we can be better leaders.
Well, it's interesting. The Bible, what's the easiest way to say this? The Bible paints a picture of an immune function that God has put into the earth. It's called light. Okay? And so our job is to bring the light. Now, what happens is when you bring light to a person, a staff member or whatever, in their performance and this and the other, when you bring light to that, what the scriptures and all psychological, psychiatric research shows over the years is that not everyone responds to light in the same way. Some people see the light. We use that expression. Oh, I see. Now I can see what I wasn't seeing. And the scriptures call that the wise person. And what they do is they adapt themselves to the light. So they become light. They perform better. They change. They thank you for it. They love you for it. Confront a wise person. They'll be grateful, it says, and they'll get better. And then it says there's a second group that will resist the light. So they don't want to change in order to become light and join the light. They want to dim the light in some way. They'll minimize the problem. They'll excuse it. They'll blame it. But the problem's never in the room. It's not them. And they resist. And the Bible calls that the mocker, the fool. It actually says that they will hate you. So you're going to get pushback and defensiveness. They're going to shoot the messenger. They'll cast insults upon you, Proverbs says. And so then it says at that point, you got to move from talking to some limits and consequences. And sometimes that wakes somebody up, different kind of light. Third category is not just resisting the light, they're actually going to attack and they're trying to hurt you. And at that point, you go into protective mode. Scripture's pretty clear about that. But what we do is, by and large, people in ministry are loving and responsible people. And they just assume everybody's like them. So if I tell them about a problem, they're going to say thank you and go change. Well, not everybody's
going to respond that way. Yeah.
So we can't control the outcome, but we can be wise enough to know what kind of light needs to be shined on what kind of person.
Yeah. So taking the personality type that you described as pastors, as leaders, and basically good people, but oftentimes hesitant to confront. I mean, I remember, Henry, when I was in college, I was a camp director, and I would walk all the way around the camp the opposite direction where I knew there were counselors messing up, and I didn't want to have to confront them. So I've had to learn to confront over the years. So it's not something that comes, at least for me, it didn't come natural early on. So
I'm glad actually. The best confronters are the ones that had to bring it into their already existing empathic, loving heart. The ones you worry about are the ones that they're the little babies. If you look at when you go in a nursery in a hospital and the newborns are there and they're wrapped up in their little burritos in the aquarium, and you see one of them that's like, blah, 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 and they're happy with the world as they find it. They're like the future people helpers. Then the one next to him is like, those are the future attorneys, and they're ready for a fight. And so I'm glad that you had to grow into.
Good. Glad to hear that. So how do you challenge pastors like us? What do you say to us to help us be good at confronting, or even just to start doing it if there's ones that are not doing it at all?
Well, remember I said earlier about pastors got to take care of themselves first.
Right.
I'm going to mute and cough for a second.
Yes, go ahead.
Pollen has got me. Sometimes somebody's not confronting, maybe because they've never been taught that that's actually love. They're not aware. This is what happened with the book Boundaries. People have been taught to be loving, forgiving, forbearing, have patience, all that, but that's half the scriptures. The other half is about being loving and patient and confront and forgiving and all that while you are confronting. The word confront, the etymology of that means to turn your face towards something, confront, look at an issue frontally. So sometimes they just need to learn, oh, this is love when I'm not enabling somebody. It's when I'm limiting and not enabling, when I'm confronting this. That's really love. That's like a parent that disciplines a kid. They love them. Sometimes that's all they need. They need a little scriptural direction and obedience. But as we know, David, most of the time we don't confront because of a fear.
Yes.
So there's something inside in my history, my experience, and here's another interesting thing about what God says about this, that when we're confronting somebody, really we're executing, there's two parallel tracks in the Bible. One is love and the other is righteousness. And you see it all the way through. The law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus. In the Psalms, it says, in God, righteousness and mercy have met. Indeed, they have kissed. So God's not divided on whether he loves somebody and whether or not he's going to tell them the truth. We are. And we have conflicts. And so sometimes we've got to do the internal work. But what I was going to say about one of the places God describes this internal conflict, when we're talking about confrontation, the Bible is clear. Micah 6:8. It has been told to you, oh man, what is good and what the Lord requires, to love mercy, to do justice, right? And to walk humbly with your God. Those are those two tracks. Loving and justice is really calling out what's right and executing on what's right. So you go to Leviticus 19. Here's what it says. Confront your neighbor frankly, clearly. And in that same context, go to 90, it's like 15 and 17. It says, do not pervert justice. And then it gives us the two conflicts. It says, do not be partial to the poor or needy, which is what we do. If somebody's really hurting and they're struggling, well, I don't want to hurt, I don't want to tell them the truth or confront them because they're, they had a hard life or they're, whatever. When I was treating a lot of depressed patients, yeah, they're poor and needy emotionally at that point. But if I don't make them do what's right to get well, they're going to continue, right? So we can't over-identify with somebody's pain to keep us from speaking truth. And then it says, don't be partial to the poor and needy, but also don't defer to the great and powerful. So sometimes we don't confront because somebody is dominant and aggressive or has some leverage over us or something. Those are our internal conflicts. And many times there's a parent from a family of origin that wore one of those. And you've internalized that, and now you're just you're just living out your script. So we got internal work to do.
I know for me, Henry, when I'm facing a need to confront, what's going on in my head is, what are the consequences if I do this? What are the possible positive things that are going to happen? What are the negatives? And so I'm constantly weighing the odds. If I do this,
well, that's smart.
There's going to be a reaction if I don't. And what I've learned over the years, I think, is that the reaction is always worse if I wait and put it off. I'm going to have to deal with it at some point, and it only gets worse. So I might as well do it sooner than later. But that's the internal struggle that I'm always going through in my head. So
It's also a good struggle because you have to bring wisdom and judgment to this. The Bible says other things about this. It says sometimes it's a glory to a man to overlook an offense. Maybe I don't confront this because there's a bigger war I'm trying to fight.
right.
Okay. And I'm not going to die on this hill because I want to take the big hill. And I got to, sometimes the consequences around it, I'm also a steward of that. Doctors, a lot of times, they will not administer a medicine because the patient isn't strong enough to metabolize it.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
it's going to kill them. So there's sometimes when it's either not the right context for the right time, or you don't have the leverage you need. See, some of these situations, nothing good is going to happen if you don't have leverage because you're going to have a fight on your hands. So there is a judgment, there's a timing, there's wisdom that goes into this, but you're right. The longer you wait, you just have to face the fact, I've got an infected tooth. Time does not heal all things. That's another crazy statement that somebody came up with. You can't tell that to an infection.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go to the dentist today because I got to give a speech this afternoon. So I might wait. But you have to realize as I'm waiting, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And there are some things that the scriptures say go immediately on. Titus, in Paul's, I think it's in Titus, Paul says, reject a divisive person after a second warning. So we don't go along with that one. If you got somebody divisive on your team or in your church, you warn them once to make them aware of what they're doing. They may just be gossiping or whatever. Go, oh, I'm sorry, and they change. You warn them a second time because either they didn't hear you or they got an agenda.
Yeah.
And they're not going to change. So after multiple warnings, division is going to end up in a church split, a divided team, budgets that can't agree, worship leaders that hate the people that have to put that stuff on the screen because they didn't get them the song they needed by Wednesday, and the service. I mean, there's consequences to division.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So,
and the funny thing is,
the
funny thing is, we're talking about church and staff or volunteers. It's true in our families with our kids. It's true in our marriages where all of this is going on. And so, I think what you're saying is so rich. I appreciate that a lot. Henry, I've gone longer than I told you we would, so thank you. You are full of gold for us as pastors, just in how to deal with people. I would also say, though, there's probably at least 4, if not 5 sermon series I've pulled out of your different books. And so pastors are always looking for content as gold that way. So thank you.
Well, can I make a plea here?
You may.
I'm not a very good marketer, self-promoter, right? Sometimes I'll mention a book because we talk about something that's a piece, and so if you want to read more about this. But I do have a request for your pastors, because it's a very personal issue to me. So I'm going to make this request. I just released a book, unlike anything I've ever written. It's called Why I Believe. And the subtitle is A Psychologist's Thoughts on Suffering, Miracles, Science, and Faith. And basically, David, what it was I was, over so many years, I have so many friends that don't know the Lord, for whom having that conversation is really difficult.
Yeah.
Where they're coming from, it's divisive. They think you're trying to convert them. I talk to a lot of people about faith, but sometimes it's just really extended family. It's just hard. But that troubled me for a long time. So I decided to solve my problem in this book. It is the preface says, "This is to my friends, the stuff about God we never talked about."
Hmm.
So it's written primarily, it's my story about suffering, how God entered into that and saved me, miracles that I've seen that validate his reality, but then the hard intellectual questions that emerged when I came to faith and how those doubts were answered for me.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And so I'm trying to let pastors know about it, because when I started to share with people, Christians said, I have that same problem.
Yeah.
I need that book to give to my friends. So I'd love it if they pick it up, and if it resonates, do something with it.
That's great. I heard you talk about the book probably 3 or 4 weeks ago and loved the premise of it. I have not yet picked it up, but I will definitely do that as well. And yeah, thank you for all the books that you've written, but that one sounds like could be hugely impactful as well.
Well, what I've been surprised at is I wrote it for people questioning faith or curious or non-faith, but what's been really surprising and encouraging to me is that it's like the scriptures say, by the blood and the testimony, right? And Christians have told me that just seeing God in that story has been faith building for them.
For
And
them too.
also, a lot of Christians have never explored some of those doubts and questions, and there's a lot in there about that. So it's been good for believers.
Very cool. Very good. Henry, thank you so much for the time, and I
Well,
appreciate
also,
you.
if I can say one more thing, great job on the summit.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a real fun summit. It just a lot of real positive response, and so yes, thank you. Were there portions that you enjoyed more than others? Is there anything that was a highlight for you?
Oh gosh. There's always, and I think, all the speakers are always great, but it depends on where somebody is, right? To who
Right.
touches
How you
you,
respond to it. Yeah.
when and where. But there were a few of those. But I I think what one of the thing that touches me the most is why I come even when I don't speak. I always come. And I brought my team.
Yeah.
The gathering together of a community and on stage you get to see examples. You learn, but you get to see examples of how the difficult aspects of leadership are common to all of us, but also how there are paths to do better and new things and all of that. And so there's something about the community experience, David. I know that happens in the remote sites as well.
Yeah.
I think the community and who you bump shoulders with and talk to in those moments, even in between the sessions, those are just huge.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Well, appreciate you being a part of the GLN family. A number of the guys that are on this podcast or listening are host site pastors as well. And so,
Well, keep doing it. Keep
thank you.
doing it.
Yeah, it's one that I definitely believe in. I think there's still a place for it and a need for it. And so, yeah, appreciate your support very much.
We're an
Henry,
evangelism tool to
very
bring,
much so.
Have churches marshal all your business folks to go bring their friends.
And that's what I loved as far as being a host pastor myself for so many years is it's an incredible opportunity to get people in the church that would never come for anything else. And so, yeah, I think its advantages are personal, but they're corporate for the church body, but even beyond the evangelistic opportunity and then just leadership development, personal development are huge. So, yeah. Thank you. Well, Henry, for the time, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank you for leaning into pastors and just having a heart to help pastors. That means a lot for me I guess I'm a former pastor. I was going to say as a pastor, but as a former pastor, it means a lot. So thank you.
You're kind of a pastor to pastors now.
That works. Yeah. Happy to be that. So yeah, cool. And have fun digging into your pile of to-do list and emails there. So hope you get it done.
You had to remind me of that, right?
Spoil your morning here, huh? Yeah, good. Henry, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Talk to you sometime.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, so thank you offline here. Appreciate it very much. So
Well,
I think you gave me enough that I may split this into two different podcasts and one on the staffing. But I didn't expect to go on the side of the personal care, but I think that's huge, and so it was worth us going down that path. And so thank you for that.
yeah. I wish more elder boards
Yes.
would wake up.
Yeah, I almost said, and we'll try to figure out a way to say it, where I think when we come out with that first segment, I'm assuming we split into two, but I'd love to be able to give that to pastors to say, give this to your board and let them hear it and let them hear the importance of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big number. It's
Yeah.
going to cost them. The big
Well,
thing
you know
is
what?
the structure and the accountability.
Yeah. What we found working with pastors here in Pennsylvania, even the smaller churches, while they may be strapped financially, they've got the money that they're spending on consultants on how to grow their church or things. If they think it's important, they'll spend the money. And so I think this is one that if the board felt it was important, they'd find a place for it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well,
all right.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All
See
right.
you soon.
See you,
Bye.
Henry.
Thank you for listening to the Advantage Podcast with David Ashcraft and for participating in our goal to strengthen and encourage pastors and their churches so more people are introduced to Jesus across Pennsylvania. If you found this helpful, feel free to pass it along. To find out more about the work of The Advantage, visit our website at theadvantage.org.